I often get asked what my favorite wood is, and honestly, I really don't have a... Oh, great. I already messed up. Here we go. But seriously, exotic wood doesn't really interest me much. I'd rather just pick something up like this cheap red oak and let the design really be the star. And instead of bouncing around explaining why one choice of wood is better than another, let's just get started. Now, I don't own a joiner, so I started out by cutting my pieces to rough length and then sent them through the planer on this sled that I made to help flatten all the pieces. A quick pass with the track saw gives me a perfectly straight line on the edge of the boards, and a pass through the table saw cleans up the other side. So now that these boards are totally milled up, I can go ahead and push these together and glue them up to make some panels that are going to make the top and the bottom of this project. Now, gluing up boards isn't really exciting, so let's hit that time travel button and flash forward to tomorrow.
Hold on to your butts.
So the glue is finally set up on the panels that are behind me. So the next thing that I need to do is trim those top and bottom panels down to their final length. Now, during this video, I'm going to show you a couple different ways to trim panels, but the most DIY friendly way is to use a straight edge and a circular saw to get the length dialed in, and then I can run the panel through the table saw to get that final width. I'm going to join the panels on the outside of this case using some rabbets. And if you don't know what that means, I'm basically just going to remove this section off the top and bottom panels. This can definitely be done with a router, but I'm going to use a stack of dado blades today. Oh crap, I didn't realize I was recording already. All right, so that's it for the top and the bottom panels of this case, but now let's jump over and make the side panels. Now when gluing up panels like this, sometimes it is difficult to get the boards perfectly flat with one another. So what I'm going to use today is the domino, but if you don't have one, you can very easily use something like biscuits or dowels. And are alignment aids required? Absolutely not. I just like to use them because it makes the glue up a little bit easier. Oh, and less potential for sanding too. I hate sanding. While I glue up the side panel, I should let you know that I do have full step-by-step plans for this project on my website at spencleydesignco.com, or the link down in the description below. Those plans guide you through every step of the build and include detailed diagrams so you can make an exact replica. Plus, they're in both imperial and metric. Want to download the SketchUp file? I've got that available for you too. With that panel glued up, I can bring it down to its final size, and this time I'm going to change things up a little bit and show another option by using my DIY crosscut sled to trim it to its final length. So at this point, I have both the top and the bottom panels done, as well as the two side panels. So the next thing that I'm gonna do is do this interior panel right in here. All right, so this panel that's gonna go in the center of the project is a lot different. So what we're gonna, I'm kidding. It's just like any other panel. We're just gonna glue it up. So get the music going. Where's the play music button? Is it right? And the third method that I use for trimming panels to their final length is with the track saw. Now it's probably the most expensive way, but it's also the most accurate method with my current tool set. And it's just quick. I'm going to attach the center panel to the case using some dominoes. This is one trick that I like to use a lot. I basically clamp down these pieces where I want them to go and cut a mortise in both the horizontal and vertical planes so they match up perfectly every single time. So I thought about putting the top and bottom of this case on right now, but I got these new drawer slides that are really fancy and weird, and I've never used anything like this before. So what I think I'm gonna do is actually put the drawer slides on now and build a box just so I have some more open space and it's just easier to kind of get into everything. There are a million ways, well, maybe not a million, but there are a ton of ways to make drawer boxes, and I've shown quite a few in my previous videos. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on this time, just know that I prefer to use 1/2-inch plywood when I'm making drawers.
I'm serious about this stuff.
So as a lot of you guys know, I always talk about how much I hate my table saw and that it was like $200 or whatever, and well, I think it's dead. So I was going to adjust the height of the blade and usually use this lever here. As you can see, it's not doing anything to move that motor. And actually, you can move this entire motor by your hand now. So I guess it looks like I'm buying a new table saw. So I ended up taking the motor basically off of the housing of the table saw, and I found these little metal shavings, which looks like they're part of the threads on the gearbox. So if you watch this whole thing can now slide up completely on its own. So obviously that's not gonna work because it's not even gonna hold the motor. So long story short, do not buy this table saw. So as you can probably tell, I had to buy a new table saw, but enough with the delay, let's get back to making the drawer. To hold the bottom panel in place, I cut a 1/2-inch dado in both the front and side pieces. And then another 1/2-inch rabbet on the ends of both of the side pieces. After cutting the bottom panel to its final size, the drawer was good to go. The hardware for these drawer slides requires some pretty specific mounting holes, and rather than trying to decipher the hieroglyphics on the instruction pamphlet, I just bought this pre-made jig. Yeah, it's worth it. I pushed the drawer slides back into place, screwed them into the side of the case, and now I can witness that smooth, soft close. And the test for the drawer was spot on, so now I can move to gluing up the case. With the glue cured, I wrote out a small recess in the back of the case that will hold the back panel in place. I swear I'm not trying to rhyme. A quick sandy sand on the corners, and this thing fits like a charm. With the case done, I can turn my attention to making the base. I'll start off by cutting some oversized pieces that I'll get the legs from. I can then mark out the start and the stop point of the tapers so I can get 2 legs out of each piece. Now honestly, I have no idea what this angle is here, and it doesn't really matter. To get a perfect cut, I'm just going to make a simple sled. Just run a scrap piece of plywood through the table saw, align those cut marks to the cut edge, and screw down a few support blocks to hold the piece in place to get that perfect taper. After one cut is made, just pop the leftover piece back in the jig and repeat until you have all of the legs made. The top of each leg gets about a 30-degree cut on it, and while you could definitely use the same slot idea, I'm just going to use my miter gauge to show another option. After cutting down a strip for the stretcher, I'll mark out where the leg is going to meet. Again, I'm not sure exactly what this angle is, but I set my miter gauge to around 40 degrees or so, and it was spot on. I used some more dominoes here and my DIY clamping blocks to get some even pressure, and I'll throw a link to that build video down in the description. Rather than try to whip up some elaborate jig that cut all the legs to the perfect length, I just ran the base through the table saw. I cut down a few more pieces to act as shorter stretchers to connect the two base pieces together, and use that domino trick again to get them to line up perfectly. After a little bit of glue action, I came back with a Forstner bit to mortise out a recess for these figure 8 fasteners. Now these will attach the base to the upper case, and they allow for a little bit of wood movement. I want to take a quick second to thank all of my Patreon supporters who are helping me get one step closer to quitting my full-time job and doing this for a living. And while there's absolutely no pressure, if you would like to help me in that pursuit, consider checking out my Patreon page and look at all the rewards I have available for you. All right, let's get back to the build. The very last thing to do is make a drawer front, and that's going to be made out of an 8/4 piece of red oak that I cut down to fit perfectly in the opening. So I know the only reason you actually clicked on this video was to see how this drawer front was made. And for that, I brought someone into the shop who longtime viewers might recognize, my girlfriend Miranda.
Hi guys. Anytime power carving's involved, you can count me in. This is by far my favorite tool in the shop, and I'm really excited to try out the new power carving unit that Arbortech has sent us. So let's get started. To make sure I didn't kill myself while I was carving, we stuck the drawer front down to the workbench with some double-sided tape. My initial idea for this piece was to make it look like flowing water, but before I started on the actual drawer front, I needed to practice on a few pieces of scrap wood to see how to make the design I wanted. I started by just making a few light passes in the wood to establish the general shape, and once I was happy with the way that looked, I carved deeper into those grooves to create depth. This table is going to be used as my meditation table, and honestly, doing the power carving became a type of meditation for me. This is my favorite tool to use because it allows you to be artistic without having to worry about hitting precise measurements or following any plans. I just turned on some good tunes and went with the flow. All puns aside, if you haven't checked out the new Glass Animals album, I highly encourage you to do so. As I started establishing these grooves, I noticed the dust collection guard started to get in my way, so I switched to the stock angle grinder guard. This made a much bigger mess, but it was so much easier to carve deeper into the wood. Oak is a wood that tends to tear and chip out a lot, and we weren't sure how well the power carving was going to work with this type of wood, but it turned out pretty smooth. At this point, I was a little bummed that my water turned out to look more like the Grand Canyon, but I remembered back to the first time I power carved, and this is the point where you want to stop carving and attack the rest with some sanding. Now you could sand this by hand, but
That's terrible.
to help with this daunting task, I use this flexible sanding pad that contours to all these rigid shapes. Eric, on the other hand, was not so lucky. He had to do everything by hand. And once the sanding was complete, we put on a few coats of finish to make my vision come to life. This is by far my favorite project and the one closest to my heart. Meditation has been an awesome outlet for me in the past year, and I'm so excited to have this beautiful table to aid in my practice. The grain in the wood reminds me of ripples in a pond and creates movement within the piece. This turned out so much better than I had originally pictured in my head, and for me, this table is not just a piece of furniture, but a work of art. Some might even call it groovy. See you on the next one!